All right. So in number 4, you have this quadratic equation, 7k squared plus 3k minus 1 equals 0. Now, if you try factoring it, it's not going to factor. So you cannot solve this quadratic equation by factoring. You won't be able to factor it. So if I want to solve this quadratic equation, what is it I've got to use? Quadratic formula. Now remember what a quadratic formula is? I'll give it to you, but do you remember what it is?
Negative b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac
Uh-huh.
divided by 2a.
All divided by 2a. Now that b squared minus 4ac, we're going to talk about that. You're going to talk about that in college algebra. That's called the discriminant. The radicand, that b squared minus 4ac, but in here you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so the other thing you may want to do is actually denote what a, b, and c are. So what's a in this case? 7. And before we go any further, you also have to make sure that your quadratic equation is in standard form. So meaning all the terms on one side, what's on the other side? 0. And it is. So this is in standard form. So a is 7. What's b? And what's c? Negative 1. So now it's just a matter of you plugging and chugging. So I get in the quadratic formula. Now remember your variable here is what letter? K. So you're going to say K equals. Now remember that negative b means the opposite of b. So if b is 3, then what's the opposite of 3? Negative 3 plus or minus the square root of. Now remember when we did part A, we put when we did the radicand, the discriminant, we put everything in parentheses. So what's b in this case? So I put that in parentheses. What am I doing to that? 3 minus 4 times a. A is in parentheses. What's a? Times c. C is in parentheses. What's c? And the whole thing, and make sure you do the whole thing. Don't just do that square root divided by 2a. It's the whole thing. So make sure you extend it. Extend it, okay? Just like I did. From negative 3 all the way to the end of the square root symbol. All that's being divided by 2 times a, and what's a? 7. So that's the first thing you're going to do. You just plugged in. Now you're going to chug some stuff. So we're going to work with the radicand. So I have negative 3 plus or minus the square root of, what's 3 squared? All right, now what's a negative 4 times a positive 7 times a negative 1? Positive 28, right? All divided by what? 14. Notice the division symbol went from negative 3 all the way to that 28. What's 9 plus 28? 37. So negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 37, all divided by 14. Then you simplified the radicals. That's the stuff that we did in chapter 15. Remember that? Can I simplify the square root of 37? Is there a perfect square other than 1 that goes into 37? No. In fact, 37 is prime number, right? That's a prime number. So I cannot simplify the square root of 37. So remember at the beginning we talked about on your study guide, we said part A, your solutions, your roots were rational numbers. Part B, your solutions are going to be irrational numbers. So is the square root of 37 a rational number or an irrational number? It's irrational. Okay, so it's irrational number. Your rational numbers, remember, are numbers that we write as a fraction, where your numerator and the denominator are integers. There's no way you can write square root of 37 as an integer divided by an integer. Now, that's the square root of 4. If this was square root of 4, then it would become what kind of number? Square root of 4? Square root of 4 is 2. So that's rational. Square root of 37 is not a whole number. It's irrational. If this was square root of 16, would the solution be rational or irrational? Rational. That goes back to part A. If this is square root of 24, rational or irrational? Huh? Irrational. Guys, you'll get rational if my radican's a perfect square. Is 24 a perfect square? No. The only times this would be irrational if this is a 1, a 4, a 9, 16, right? 25. Anything else is going to be irrational. So, I can ask simplify the square root of 37. On my math lab, you can leave your answer like this. That will be your answer. So I really have how many solutions, though? I don't have one. How many solutions do I have? 2, with a plus or minus, right? So my solutions, if I wanted to break them down, my solutions are negative 3 plus the square root of 37 over 14. What's the other? Negative 3 minus the square root of 37 over 14. Those are your solutions. How many are there? 2. Now, in college algebra, you're going to be asked to graph these functions. Now remember, quadratic functions, that parabola. In here, the parabolas are easy to graph. Next semester, you have to find what the intercepts are. So here you have to approximate. So on your calculator, and we talked about this last class period, on your calculator, I want you to approximate this to the nearest tenth. Remember how you do this? On your calculator, you say this: negative 3 plus the square root of 37, and then press enter. So that's your numerator. Now we got to divide by what? 14, and to the nearest tenth, it's what, 0.2? So next semester you learn that happens to be your x-intercepts. My x-intercept is approximately 0.2. That's one of them. But how many x-intercepts are there? How many solutions are there? 2. Let's find the other. So negative 3 minus the square root of 37 equal, divide by 14, and that one's approximately equal to negative 0.6. Okay? So on your worksheet, on this section, you're going to be asked to find the exact answer. So these are your exact answers. And these will be your approximations. Round it off. Round it to the nearest tenth. Okay? So that was number 4. That's all you have to do, number 4. All right. Now, on my math lab, you're going to have to separate them on my math lab. So you are going to, on my math lab, you got to write the answer like this. You're going to say, you have to write these two things. You're going to say negative 3 plus the square root of 37, all divided by 14, and what's the other? Negative 3 minus square root of 37, all over 14. On the test, you can leave it in that box form right here. But know there are how many solutions here? 2. Okay, there are 2 solutions. All right, so that's number 4. Okay, let's look at number, let's see. Okay, number 16. You have 10 minus x squared equal 2x. 10 minus x. 10 minus x squared equal 2x. What kind of equation is this? Quadratic. So if I'm going to use a quadratic formula, I've got to have this in standard form. Now, last class period, we mentioned this. Always rewrite it so the coefficient of x squared is positive. What's the coefficient of x squared here? Negative. In fact, it's a -1. So rewrite it so that way it's positive. So let's see how it's negative on the left side. Let's bring everything to the right side. So when I bring everything to right side, remember you just got to, in this case, add x squared and then subtract 10. So you can get 0 equals what? And put in descending order.
X squared plus 2x minus 10.
Minus 10 equals 0. Okay. So x squared plus 2x minus 10 equals 0. So the only two terms you brought to the side were the 10 and negative x squared. So it became negative 10 and positive x squared. All right, what's A in this case? A, B, and C. What's A?
1,
What's B?
2,
And what's C?
negative 10.
Okay. And then you just plug into the quadratic formula. It's going to say x equals the opposite of B. If B is 2, that becomes what?
Negative 2.
-2 plus or minus the square root of B squared. What's B in this case?
2.
What am I doing to it?
Raised to the second power.
Squaring it. Minus 4 times A in parentheses, 1, times C in parentheses, -10, all divided by, make sure you go from -2 all the way to the end of the square root symbol. 2 times A, and A is 1. Okay, so first thing, that's your first step. Your first step is to take those values, plug into the formula. Then you're going to simplify the radicand. So you had -2 plus or minus the square root of, what's 2 squared? Okay, what's a -4 times a +1 times a -10?
Positive 40.
+40, all divided by 2. 4 plus 40 is 44. That's where I'm at. Okay. Now look at the square root of 44. Can I simplify the square root of 44? Yes. We did a whole section on simplifying radicals. So that's where you're going to use that information. So what I would do is I'd just go off to the side somewhere and figure out how to simplify the square root of 44. What perfect square goes into 44? 22 is not a perfect square. 4. So that's 4 times what? 11. And what's the square root of 4?
2.
So that's 2 what?
11.
Square root 11. So I'm going to rewrite the square root of 44 as this. All right, so that's where I'm at. Okay? All right, now, even if you stop there, you'll get most of your points. You won't get all of it, but you'll get most of it because I expect you to go further with this. I want you to notice I'm circling, and you got to do the same thing. You got to think about, all right, I simplified it. Now let's look at these numbers here that I'm circling. Can I do those 3 things I have circled? Do they have any common factor?
Yes.
What do they have in common? What number can go into all of them? 2. So then you do that. You say -2 into 2 is? -1, plus or minus. 2 into 2 is? 1. So I get square root of 11. All over what? No. You're dividing everything by 2. 1. But anything divided by 1 is that numerator, right? So there's your answer. -1 plus or minus the square root of 11. -1 plus or minus the square root of 11. And you may say, well, you didn't circle anything previously. Well, let's look at the previous one. Go back to the previous one. Okay? First of all, can I simplify the square root of 37? No. Now I'm circling, though. I'm circling these 3 things. Now that's where here's understood to be a 1, right? Those 3 things, besides the number 1, do they have anything else in common? No. So you're stopped. You're done. You stop. Okay? So the answer is just -1 plus or minus square root of 11. That's how you would write it. Now, on my math lab, though, you actually gonna break it. You actually determine what the two solutions are. What are the two solutions?
-1 plus the square root of 11.
And what's the other?
Negative
-1
one.
minus square root of 11.
Yeah, now remember that's your exact answers, right? Now, on the worksheet, I'm also going to say, give me the approximate answer to the nearest 10th. So in your calculator, approximate -1 plus the square root of 11. So -1 plus the square root of 11, you should get, make sure you know you use a calculator, to the nearest 10th. The first one's approximately equal to 2.3 to the nearest 10th. And the next one, -1, subtract the square root of 11, press equal, and the other one is -4.3. So 2.3, -4.3. Okay? All right, so that was number 16. Number 20. Number 20. You have 11p squared plus 2 equal 10p. 11p squared plus 2 equal 10p. So what kind of equation is this? Quadratic. And the directions say use quadratic formula. And even if it didn't say what method to use, you're going to notice that, and you always try factoring first. You couldn't factor this. So if nothing works, you have to resort to using the quadratic formula. But regardless whether I use factoring or quadratic formula, and again, I can't use factoring here, I have to put it in what form? Standard form. And you always will make sure that the coefficient of your squared term is positive. So p squared is positive, so let's bring everything to that side. And let's put it in descending order. So there's going to be 11p squared, and then tell me what else to write. Okay? Equal 0. All right, so now it's in standard form. What's A?
11.
What's B?
-10.
And what's C?
2.
2. So now we just plug into the formula. Remember, I'll give you the formula. I'll give you the quadratic formula. Remember, all that's being divided by 2a. All right, so you're going to say p equals, because your variable is p this time, the opposite of b. What's b in this case? -10. What's the opposite of that? 10. So I get 10 plus or minus the square root of b. What's b? What am I doing to it? Squaring it. Minus 4 times a. What's a?
11.
Times c. What's c? 2. All divided by 2 times a, which is 11, right? Okay. Now let's simplify the radicand. So that becomes 10 plus or minus the square root of, what's -10 times itself? 100. A -4 times 11 times 2 is a -88 divided by 22. What's 100 minus 88? No, 12, right? 12. All right, so that's where I'm at. Now again, if you stop there, you'll get most of your points. You won't get all of it, because I want you to simplify this as much as you can. That's why we studied chapter 15. So look at the square root of 12. Now 12 is not a perfect square. But is there a perfect square other than one that goes into 12? Huh? What is it? 4. So go off to the side somewhere and figure out what that is. So square root of 12 is the square root of 4 times 3, right? So the square root of 12 is going to be what? 2 square root of 3. So it goes here. So that'll be 10 plus or minus 2 square root of 3 all divided by 22. So you get to that point, you'll get a few more points. But are you going to get, let's say this is 10 points, are you going to get full 10 points here? If you leave it like that, are you going to get full 10 points?
No.
No. Why not?
You can still simplify.
You can still simplify. So remember that little circling I told you to do? 10, 2, and 22? What do those three things have in common besides the number 1? 2. So simplify, divide all those things. Now remember, it's both of them, because remember, what you do to the numerator, you do to the denominator. So there's going to be 10 divided by 2 is 5, plus or minus 1 square root of 3, but just leave it as square root of 3 divided by 11. So there's your answer. That's the only way you'll get full credit. Now on my math lab, you're going to have to write it as 2 solutions. What is it? 5 plus the square root of 3 divided by 11. Now remember, you gotta underline going from 5 to square root of 3. Don't just say 5 plus and then square root of 3 and put the division symbol on the square root of 3. It's the whole thing, right? Divided by 11. What's the other one? What's going to be the numerator? 5 minus square root of 3, and the denominator is 11. Now let's approximate this to the nearest tenth. So that's your exact answer. These two. Now let's approximate. Okay, so on your calculator, you're going to say 5 plus the square root of 3. Press enter. Okay. Divide by what? Divide by what? 11. So the nearest tenth, what's this root approximately equal to? Right. Now next semester, when you graph these quadratic equations, these quadratic functions, the parabola, these are, you're going to learn those are actually your x-intercepts. And you can actually understand now because remember, to find the x-intercept, your y value is 0. And that's what this is right here. That right here, that's your y value, 0. 5 minus the square root of 3. Press equal. Then divide by 11. And what's the other solution approximately equal to? 0.3. Okay. All right, so that was number 20. All right, let's do one more with this, because that's all this is just plug and chug. Same thing like part B. And then the main part here was simplifying the radicals, which we did in chapter 15. All right, let's look at number, let's do 28. 28. So you have 6z squared equal 2 minus 3z. 6z squared equals 2 minus 3z. All right. It's not going to be factorable, so don't even try to factor this. So you are going to have to use quadratic form. But even if it were factorable, what would you have to do first? What's that called? What's that form called? Standard form. All right, z squared is positive on the left side. The coefficient, I mean, is positive on the left side. So let's bring everything to the left and put in descending order. So what are you going to write?
6z squared plus 3z minus 2.
Equal? 0. All right, what's A? What's B?
3.
What's C?
-2.
All right, so negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. All right, so what's my variable? No, variable.
Oh, sorry.
Z.
Z equal. All right, this says the opposite of B, so B is 3. That becomes negative 3. Plus or minus the square root of B. Remember, the radicand, you put all those values in parentheses. So B is 3. I'm squaring it. Minus 4 times A. A is 6 in parentheses. Times C in parentheses. And what's C? All divided by, make sure you go from negative 3 all the way to the end of the square root symbol. 2 times A is 6. All right, let's simplify the radicand. So I get negative 3 plus or minus the square root of, what's 3 squared? 9. Okay, what's the negative 4 times 6 times the negative 2? Positive 48
Yes.
divided by 12. What's 9 plus 48?
57.
All right, now let's look at 57. Can I simplify the square root of 57? Is there a perfect square other than one that goes into 57?
No.
Right. And now 57 is not prime, right? Don't think 57 is prime because it's not. 3 goes into 57. So let's just look at 3. Although I know 3 is not a perfect square, let's see what happens when I use 3. 57 divided by 3 is 19. So you agree that 57 is 3 times 19? And both of those are prime. So there's no way I can simplify this using a square root because 3 and 19 are prime. None of them is a perfect square. All right, so that's all I do there. And then the only other thing you got to do is ask yourself, these parts I have circled, can I simplify that part? Who said yes? How? Say again?
Oh, no. Did you have a 1? Oh,
Yeah, that's a 1 right here.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
All right, so those 3 things, the only number that these 3 have in common that goes into all 3 is the number 1. Nothing else. So your answer is going to be negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 57 divided by 12. On my math lab, you're going to say negative 3 plus the square root of 57 divided by 12. And what's the other solution? All right, now, to approximate this, now remember, these are your exact solutions right here. Those are your exact. Another word for solution is the word roots. So those are your exact roots, your exact solutions. All right, approximate this, negative 3 plus the square root of 57. Press equal, then divide by 12. So 0.4 is the first one. The other solution is approximately equal to negative 3 minus the square root of 57. Press enter, then divide by 12. Negative 0.9. All right. Okay. All right. So that is your study guide. That's part B. So you have one problem that's gonna look like this. Okay. Now there is a part C that's not on here, but it's on your final, and that's where we start talking about, and we'll do this probably Thursday, but it's not on your final. That's where we start talking about imaginary numbers, like 3i, 7 plus 6i, the letter I. We'll see what that means when we get to that. You're going to need that next semester. All right, but that is your part B. So you have one like this and then one like part A. Okay? Now remember, part B, what kind of solutions are these? Rational or irrational? Irrational. Part A, those solutions are what? Rational. Because they all look like, I don't know, these, but see. Negative 4 is what kind of number? Rational or irrational? Rational. Negative 5 is what kind of number? Rational. 3 is what kind of number? Rational. Negative 4/3 is what kind of number? Rational. 7/3 is what kind of number? Rational. Negative 1 is what kind of number? Rational. Square root of 57 is what kind of number? Irrational. Okay. So a rational number is where you can write a number as a fraction where you have an integer divided by an integer. Like negative 4 is negative 4 over 1. Those are integers. 7/3, 7 is an integer, 3 is an integer. But square root of 57 is not an integer. If you approximate it, look, square root of 57. Is that an integer? No, that's not an integer. The integers are numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 0, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. That's not any of that. Okay? Okay, now let's look at, okay, so that takes care of this part B.